Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today we've got James Pringle on. He's the founder and managing partner of Goldsmith Ventures. Hi, James.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Let's jump straight in. Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently launching a new VC fund. I've done one before, and I also run one of the UK's largest investor networks, which is basically made up of angels and family offices that invest in startups. So we specialize in supporting UK tech companies with fundraising.
I mean, that sounds incredibly cool. What a job. I mean, it must be so varied and also so exciting all the time working with these amazing startups.
It is, yeah. So it's a very relationship-driven role. It's either speaking to investors and understanding their needs and their interests and what they're looking for. But the really exciting bit is speaking to founders that are trying to change the world in some way or change the way we live. And that's a really exciting bit. So getting to speak to founders is a huge privilege. And I've been a founder myself of a tech company. So I hope that I bring a bit of kind of understanding to what they're going through, the level of responsibility that they have, and the kind of pressures and pains of being a founder, which can sometimes be a little bit lonely, but can also be the most exhilarating thing to kind of give you purpose around. So yeah, it is a great role. I absolutely love it, and it's been a bit of a journey to get here.
I mean, like you say, we're lucky enough on this podcast to have, founders from amazing companies. And recently we've had quite a few from sort of tech industries or people using tech to revolutionize old industries, which has just been so fascinating. I can talk to them for hours. But how did this all come about? So what's your journey? How did you actually get into this position? Because I mean, I can't imagine there's a straight path to doing what you do.
Well, there is an old straight path which is completely sort of changing. So the traditional path to what I do is really go to a top tier university, then go and work for McKinsey, then do an MBA,
Yeah.
and then end up at a VC firm as an associate, and then after enough time, launch your own fund. My route is very, very different for a whole load of reasons and personal choices. So I actually struggled to get into university because I got 3 C's at A level first time around. Partly, I would say, to do with the fact that I had glandular fever for about 4 months of my
Oh,
A
no.
level year, which wasn't particularly helpful. But I also wasn't doing the right subjects and wasn't particularly motivated. So I actually had to go and retake my A levels, which meant I had a sort of half gap year rather than a normal one.
Mm.
And that did get me into university, which was great. I went to Newcastle. It was a lot of fun and a great place to study. But what I realized quite quickly is that applying for summer internships and graduate schemes, often the application forms would ask you for your first set of A-level results, not what you got after taking lots of retakes. And unfortunately, it would often kind of gray out the next button when I put in what I actually got. So I couldn't really get a job, or that's what it felt like. I was probably slightly aiming too high, but it felt like there was this kind of barrier to entry based on something that was no longer in my control and historical. So I had a real kind of moment where I thought, well, what am I really excited about? And it was kind of at the time where Facebook was getting massive, and the UK tech scene was still very, very early in its kind of infancy. And I thought, well, I'd love to be a founder. I'd love to start companies. I'd shown a little bit of entrepreneurial flair in my teenage years, but nothing serious. But I kind of knew that I wanted to be a founder. And I thought, well, the only way I'm going to get good at that is by doing it and
Yeah.
being a founder and making a ton of mistakes. So I founded my first business in my placement year between second and third year at university. And it was an app, and that got me kind of hooked into the tech world, and had a lot of fun. It was an app that you could book live comedy events through.
Oh, cool.
So I got to go to loads of comedy. We sold a few thousand tickets, but unfortunately, people aren't that spontaneous. They generally plan weeks or months or sometimes years in advance for arena tickets. So it never quite took off. But when I went back for my third year, I had learned so much from just doing a year of running my own company that I kind of sort of breezed through my final year and massively improved my results and got the degree I wanted, which helped kind of get my parents off my back a little bit. And then I decided to then go and work for a VC-backed startup that was much further ahead in its journey. And that company went through Seed Camp, so one of Europe's top accelerator programs. I was the first employee, and within about 6 months, we were sitting in Google campus surrounded by lots of other amazing founders and designers, developers, angels, VCs, and again, just trying to be a sponge, just trying to learn as much as possible. Stayed there for a few years and then founded a business in 2015 called Suggestive, which was a SaaS company, so software as a service.
Yeah.
And our clients included people like The Telegraph, The Mail Online, Bloomberg, Lad Bible, Capital Radio, New York Post.
Wow.
Again, we raised money, VC money, and grew pretty quickly. And then the market we were in changed slightly. We were in video, and video went from being fairly underserved with technology to suddenly video being absolutely everywhere. And that did change the unit economics. So we decided not to raise more money, which was a good decision. And we reached out to a load of our partners and said, we're available to be acquired, actually. And we were acquired in 2019 by one of our partners, which was a great outcome. It wasn't life-changing by any means.
Yeah.
It's not splashed all over TechCrunch or anything like that, but we got a good outcome. And that kind of then freed me up to take all of that knowledge and understanding of being, close to the ice face or whatever the saying is, and consider what I wanted to do next. And the thing I wanted to do next was to work with lots of founders and see lots of different business ideas and be an investor. And I'm probably rambling a little bit, but I decided that actually going and working for a VC firm, I wasn't actually going to get the experience I needed to run my own VC firm, which was the ultimate goal. I wasn't going to sit on an investment committee and make a decision about which company we invested in. I wasn't going to raise the fund or have access to the people that did and who they raised it from. And I wasn't going to be kind of leading the operational side. So I decided to launch an investor network instead and just start doing deals. And I kind of knew how that all worked. So that helped. And we scaled pretty quickly through some of my kind of entrepreneurial nous of using social platforms and things like that. And then we started to build a pretty good portfolio. And that quickly led to me being invited to be a co-founder of a new fund, which was called Love Ventures. And that was a fintech proptech fund. And that was amazing. That was like within sort of 12 months, I got to where I wanted to be, which was to be a founder of my own fund. The only thing was I was in business with two brothers and they were the other two founders. So we did one fund together, but I realized that for me to really execute the vision I had, I needed to go it alone. So I left, and I'm in the process of getting our FCA approval so we can launch Goldsmith Ventures, which is really, really exciting.
I mean, to anybody that's sort of the way of mind of, entrepreneurial or something like that, or it sounds like to me, you're a guy that likes to put your hand in lots of different pies, and you have lots of different interests. And that is something that being in charge of a VC fund would allow you to do, right?
Yeah, so you get a lot of variety for sure at doing what we do. Some days you're asking for money and raising money from someone else. The next day you're being a decision maker about whether someone else has got the right business to invest in. So that's quite fun, kind of sitting on both sides of that. You still have to do a load of the operational and administrative side of running a company. So hiring, growing, managing team members, tax, accounts, everything. And I still feel like I'm a founder. I've just stopped founding tech companies and I'm founding venture companies. And hopefully these will be the last ones I found. Hopefully we'll just build a kind of franchise legacy VC from here on in for the next sort of 30, 40 years. So that feels very good that I know what I want to do and that I'm on that path to doing it, which I think is a big struggle for a lot of people, is not even really knowing what the end goal is. And so it's very hard to plan and work towards something when you don't know where you're going.
Yes,
whereas
definitely.
I feel very lucky that I love what I do, and I know that I can do it for the next 30, 40 years, and that if I do it well, then I have a chance to be fairly successful as well, which is important to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's in the, in this world of, sort of fintech and insurtech and even in e-commerce, there's a ton of sort of funds and venture capital funds and, angel investors and things like that, which are now starting smaller companies to invest in sort of seed rounds and very, very early startups. So the kind of job you're doing, or, the people that you're basically looking to employ, there's going to be more of these jobs around. Would you agree? And you don't actually have to go and work for the likes of McKinsey. There will be opportunity sort of with these newer companies like the one you're starting up now.
Short answer is yes. I mean, the whole tech and venture space is going to continue to grow massively over the next 10, hopefully 20 plus years. Being in venture allows you to constantly be at the forefront of change anyway. So if, at the moment, a lot of venture is looking at fintech and software as a service and things like that, which are quite tangible technologies. But, there is also further down the hype cycle, there is a lot of stuff happening around virtual reality and space and things like that. And as those become more kind of mainstream, as a venture capitalist, you can quite easily say, okay, well, I'm going to direct funds into those sorts of businesses. So you're constantly at the cutting edge, which again is great. But in terms of like more roles, yes, there are definitely going to be more roles, and with that, there is also going to be more competition. And there's a lot happening at the moment around opening up those opportunities to a broader set of candidates than maybe has historically happened. So that's a big positive. But yeah, I mean, anyone really can end up being a venture capitalist, but there are a few things that help. So one is an understanding of finance, and that can come in various forms, whether it going and working in finance or running your own P&L and knowing how a company actually operates. You also need to you can also come at it from a founder perspective, having run a company as obviously the finance side, but also just knowing a bit about product, a bit about leadership, a bit about management, a bit about marketing from doing it yourself. You have a better view of a company than if you've maybe just been stuck in one particular role in a big company doing one thing. You're going to struggle to really analyze the go-to-market strategy of a new company or the product strategy of a new company, because you've never had to necessarily do those things. So yeah, there are a few different ways to come at being a venture capitalist, and that, yeah, if anyone wants to find out more about how they might want to move towards that, I'm happy for people to get in touch with me and me to kind of make suggestions on what kind of is missing from their current remit to make them a viable candidate for being a venture capitalist.
That's very kind of you. So what interests me as well, and I don't know if you'll agree with me, I think coming at venture capital as you've done, as a founder yourself and an entrepreneur, I think personally I'd have more confidence in that venture fund than I would necessarily somebody who's been to university or studied finance. And okay, they have a really good appreciation for those subjects, but running a business is completely different. It's not always what it says on the paper. There's a lot that goes into it where a founder might have a better appreciation. Do you think for young people now that might want to get into venture capital, if they've got ideas to start businesses or they think about working at a startup, that might be a better route in the future than necessarily going into university?
Good question. A few layers to it. I mean, there are lots of benefits to university beyond just what you learn, basically. Sure. You grow up a bit in that time, you become more rounded individual, I think, and you do come out with a qualification, which is often a minimum entry to a lot of good jobs. But going and working for a startup is incredibly powerful. It's one of the things I actually miss slightly from my own CV, which I worked at some really interesting companies and I founded companies and made loads of mistakes, which have hopefully benefited me. And because I've been given a lot of responsibility in early stage companies, I've had to sort of learn quite a lot about sort of different sort of parts of the business. But the bit I'm missing is like ex Uber, ex Deliveroo, ex Revolut, and that is a powerful thing. And as an investor, it shouldn't hold as much sway as it does, but it is powerful when you say, I'm ex head of product at so and so, and you go, okay, well, you know how to build products then. So going and working for a tech unicorn or scale up can be really valuable to slap on your CV for whatever you go and do next, whether it's going and working in something slightly earlier stage or founding something and needing to raise money, or becoming a freelance consultant. People are going to say, well, you worked at that company, so you must kind of know how it all works. So yeah, there are definitely lots of different routes. University is just one of them. But I think university plus some like household name tech experience, plus some hard skills, either around finance, product, or growth, in brackets, marketing, you're pretty employable if you can do one of those well, and you've worked at a big company and you've got a degree.
Right. And also talking about roles, as you grow your company, as you come to make hires, what kind of roles are actually in venture capitalism?
Yeah, so running a venture firm really is, well, it's made up of a few parts, but the main three parts of running a venture capital firm are operations, which is going to be legal, accountancy, finance. And when I say finance, I mean like regulation and compliance and stuff like that. You can outsource that bit, and smaller funds like ours have a partner that kind of cover the operational side, but you still need to be able to read the contracts that they provide you and everything. So you need to know a bit about that. Fundraising, which is more commonly known as investor relations. So going out to family offices, high net worths, banks, institutions, pension funds, whatever it might be, to raise money for your fund. Investor relations I think it's quite a satisfying role, because you can come at it from all different angles, and you can start to become, investor relations person, either at a startup or in a big bank or in an insurance company. Lots of companies have people that are doing kind of client management, which can end up being kind of like fundraising, and then you're in the investor relations world. And those jobs are really important, because without funds, you've got nothing to invest. So you need to be good at investor relations, and lots of different companies and roles can lead you to being an investor relations person. The third one is obviously executing deals. So investment director or chief investment officer. And the starting point of that is like associate, which is, or intern, then associate, then senior associate. And then you might be like an investment director. And partners are generally, on the whole, they are all investing partners. So they're all part of the investment committee. You might have an operations partner who's not, but on the whole, partners are. But then marketing and content and things like that have become really, really important. I mean, some of the listeners might be aware of a guy called Harry Stebbings, who's only 26, and he's just raised a £140 million fund. He's actually got a few funds but that's his
140 million.
flagship. And he started by starting a podcast when he was 18 and interviewing VCs. And he interviewed so many VCs. I think he's got over 3,000 episodes now. That it's called 20-Minute VC, his podcast. He interviewed so many that he had this incredible network of VCs, and he had all of the learnings and knowledge from speaking with them. And he started to get sponsorship for his podcast. He started to make money, and he started to get invited to very exclusive off-market deals where he would get in because of who he was, not because of his track record or how much money he could put in or anything like that. So he started investing, probably started small, 5, 10K here and there. And now he then was invited to be a partner at a fund. He did that for a year or so, saw how it all worked. And then he went out and raised 140 million for his own fund. So, I mean, that's an amazing kind of trajectory. And it does show the power of kind of like networking, content, distribution, and general kind of like people knowing who you are in the market, because without that, deals are more and more competitive and founders need to want to work with you. So you need to build some form of reputation and awareness around who you are and why people should care and even consider you if they're also getting knocks on the door from the top funds like Sequoia or Index or Excel. These are big VC firms that have been around since like the 80s and 90s and have invested in lots of unicorns and have deep pockets, and it's hard to compete with them without having something unique. And social media is still relatively new, but younger founders and younger investors know more about that than maybe some of the older partners. And so there's an opportunity to kind of like carve your own brand into the venture scene at the moment, which is exciting.
That's so interesting, because this keeps coming up in every industry we've talked about. Social media is 5-10 years old now, but it's still providing such a huge opportunity in so many different industries. So for it to be in VC itself, I mean, I wouldn't even think that was part of it. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it can come in any form, really. So obviously, Harry is a podcaster. I do podcasting. Some other VCs do, but there's still not that many. It's maybe like 10 good podcasts within the whole venture space, like globally, that I can literally think of. There aren't loads that I go to regularly and think, that's where I want to go to hear about venture. Harry's is one of them, and hopefully ours is becoming one of them. But yeah, that's just podcasting. But there are people that are doing really good Substack newsletters. There are people now doing TikTok channels. There are people that stream live on Twitch and interview founders. There's still so much sort of blue sky around creating a brand, creating a knowledge hub, and then also being able to kind of distribute, being able to, if you've got 1 million followers, whether it's listeners on a podcast, followers on Instagram, streamers on Twitch, whatever it is, if you said, I've just invested in this company, I mean, that company is going to get a huge benefit from that.
Yeah.
So distribution is also important post-investment. So yeah, and you just have to look at influencers. They're now launching their own brands. You've got like Spencer Matthews from Made in Chelsea launching a non-alcoholic gin brand. And that's kind of like the future. It used to be like the Ryan Reynolds of this world would launch a gin brand. Now it's like an influencer. And I'm sure in 5 years it will be like, well, less. It's already happening. TikTokers are launching like venture firms and their own clothing brands and drinks brands and everything like that, because that's a better way to monetize their audience than just being told to hold up a new fake town or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, we had the episode that just released today, actually. Vic, she owns one of the first TikTok first marketing agencies. And she started that purely because she started on TikTok when it was Musical.ly. And within a year, she gained 1 million followers. all about beauty and beauty tutorials. And now it's got to the point where she's so good at TikTok that brands have come to her and she started her own agency. So you're right, distribution and an audience and awareness is just completely vital to business. So that's interesting. It's in VC. But for you, if somebody's thinking of going into it, what would be some key personality traits that you think would really help you in the world?
So I would say there's a few things. So one is it's a very relationship driven business. So personal way of, well, being good at relationships helps. That's not to say every VC is or that I am, but it does help. You have to try and build rapport, and ultimately you're trying to get a deal over the line, and there's lots of different perspectives and interests around the table. So being able to kind of manage that complexity and get everyone on the same page is really important. I would say that organization is really, really important within venture. If you can imagine, there's a pot of money and there's lots of people that want to get money, then you can be quite overwhelmed with the response when you announce a new fund or you do a deal and it gets announced or whatever it might be. So you have to be really controlled and measured with your organization. I have a policy of no ghosting, no professional ghosting. So if a founder reaches out, we'll always reply. I like that because if I was a founder, that's what I would want, and it saves the founder having to like follow up when it's not relevant. So we do respond, but we don't always respond with essays. You know, sometimes it can be quite short, and that doesn't feel great, but it's better than them wasting their time following up and everything. So I'm personally kind of like inbox zero. My calendar is down to like every 15 minutes is pretty much documented. So I've got pretty good habits around like being super controlled and focused and organized around how I manage my time. And yeah, so I'd say just like being organized, being good at relationships, being able to read contracts and read balance sheets. It is important, you know, due diligence. You still need to know like what are the terms with that advisor they've got, how long is their office lease, what does the marketing budget look like in year 4 within their financial plan. You have to end up sort of being able to read those documents and understand what they mean and how to dive into them. So yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, sorry, I'm probably repeating.
No, honestly, really great answer.
Legal, financial, people, and an organization.
Sure. And for you, what would be the number one positive of working within this industry?
Do you know what? It's a bit of a funny one, but there is something weirdly satisfying about finding a company that's pre-launch, working with them in some way, whether that's investing or advising or introducing them to someone, and then a year later you're just watching TV and you see their advert on TV and you're like, that is actually pretty cool. So I do find that really satisfying. That is like a goosebumpy moment when you've been right at the inception working with a founder, and then you see that company or product in the real world, whether it's on a bus ad or someone using the app on the tube or whatever it might be. It's kind of weird feeling. But from a sort of day-to-day perspective, I just think that there is something also very exciting where you have a lot of founder meetings, so you spend a lot of time on Zoom or drinking coffee, and most of them, unfortunately, you're not going to invest, so that's not particularly fun. But when you find one where you're like, how have I not known about this before? This person is incredible. I cannot wait to spend more time with this founder and understand how they're going to solve this problem. And then you go and tell someone else about it and they go, that's amazing. I would definitely use that. Your energy is just like all consuming. You're like, I have to get into this deal. I have to help this company raise the right money. I'm so bullish about their future. And often you'll know that within kind of 60 seconds or less of meeting the founder. So those are great meetings and it's very exciting. And maybe that's a bit of advice to everyone as well. If anyone's listening that is thinking about fundraising, investors will probably know pretty quickly. And if they haven't disclosed a kind of follow up by the end of the meeting or within sort of 24 hours of meeting you, then 9 times out of 10, it's probably a no. But that's okay, because it's a very selective entry model, and try and learn from that experience and see where did they get energy, where did their energy drop, like how do you alter your pitch and your business model and your team and everything to being something that would be more interesting for the next investor.
Sure. And then on the flip side of that, what would be sort of something that's less positive or maybe a bit negative about working in the industry?
It's a lot of work. So I think some VCs get accused of being lazy because they don't respond to stuff. The fact that they're not responding to stuff is probably because they have got way too much to do. So you get, as I said, you get quite a lot of inbounds, then you have quite a lot of meetings, and then you have a lot of follow-up and deals to do. On top of that, you've also got to manage your existing portfolio. So you've got to go and speak to that founder that you backed a year ago and find out what happened in the last quarter and things like that. And so you're under quite a lot of time pressure. And if you let it slip, it can get ahead of you and overwhelming, and then you start missing out on deals and things like that. So it can be quite a lot of work, but I personally think it's really fun work. So that's okay. And the biggest negative is unfortunately having to say no to people. And sometimes there is no explanation really. It's a hunch or a feeling or a lack of energy for what this business is. It's not that they're doing anything wrong or they're not a good founder. It's a feeling you get where you go, I'm not the right investor, or I'm not jazzed about this, so I can't take it forwards because I'm also talking to 10 other founders. So yeah, there are some negatives, but some of them are just sort of the emotional side of unfortunately have to say no to people.
Sure. Would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Yes, 100%. Firstly, tech broadly is a great space to be in. As I said, you can kind of be at the cutting edge of new waves of interest in growth industries, which is really cool. Also, when I started in tech, we weren't where we are today. So there was a lot less funding around. There wasn't anyone who had built a big tech company in the UK at all. We were still asking questions like, can UK build a Google? Now it's completely different. We have over 100 unicorns in the UK.
Wow.
We've got lots of unicorns across Europe. We've got companies like Revolut and Deliveroo and Babylon Health and Kazoo and Klarna in Sweden, Stripe in Ireland. We've got some really big tech companies. And as a result of that, there are loads of other people that really know what they're doing in the tech space. So they've worked in product or growth, or they founded a business, or they worked in operations, or they were a VC that backed one of those companies, and they've seen these businesses go from 0 to billions in market cap. And now they're taking all that knowledge and going back into early stage stuff for themselves, or with more employee shares, or as an investor with bigger tickets. And so that success flywheel is happening right now. And there couldn't be a better time for people to look at either getting into tech or founding a company, or eventually, being a VC, or looking to angel invest in early stage as well, which capital is at risk within your own means, but that can be a very fun way to dabble in the tech space without necessarily having to quit a high paid job in law or banking, or if you're a doctor or whatever.
Well, thank you so much for your time, James. It's been great to hear about venture capitalism, learning more about it. It sounds incredibly exciting. And thank you for coming on.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me, Daniel. I hope some of that was useful to people. And I'm 100% accessible individual. So I'm on LinkedIn, James Pringle. Anyone can come and find me.
Amazing. Thank you.